Ignorant news websites are a massive burden on the internet. Like parasites, they exploit the public's dumbass fears to sell them the latest insane propaganda. And once they get you into their echo chamber, it's hard to get out. For the most part, no one pays them any attention, but once in a while some idiot will get too inducted, because ignorant ideologies can inspire insane tendencies in morons, i.e. the Charleston church massacre that happened a few months ago. That asshole was directly inspired by garbage sites claiming there's a race war, and through constant bombardment, someone with a mental illness could easily be motivated by these useless news outlets, and feel the impulse to act on their ideals. But recently this trend has been spreading like cancer to websites where a vast majority of morons go to learn their news. Shit-eating sites like Huffingtonpost and BuzzFeed, where their message of a race war can reach tens of millions of people, and all it takes is one sadistic asshole to start something that no one wants to see. Hello, I'm Howard Williams, and this is Sociopathic Therapy. There's a fuckload of despicable articles on these popular websites, which makes them all the more dangerous compared to those dipshit websites where no one goes to. So choosing one at random to pick apart, let's dive into this garbage. So first off, you may notice that this article is under the Black Voices section of Huffington Post, which I find hilarious for a few different reasons. When you click on it, it brings you to this lovely page where all the articles written for black people reside. Just in case searching is too difficult, I guess. It's a nice little page for anyone who needs help finding what their voice should sound like. And I assume all voices are representative, right? How about white voices? Oh. How about Asian? Shit. How about Latin? Fuck. Latino? Oh shit, at least Huffington Post is looking out for these two voices, right? I just find it kind of demeaning, but hey, I didn't come to Huffington Post to be educated. I came here to judge. That being said, this article is written by a white girl who went to USC, where the average tuition is $47,000. I'm sure she has tons of quote-unquote black voice. Rudy Giuliani says black parents need to teach their children to respect police, which, right off the bat, pretty racist claim by Mr. Giuliani, right? You take black out of that and I can get behind this 100%. Parents should teach their kids to respect authority. My parents did, and I've never been to jail, prison, in handcuffs, or shot. You may notice I didn't include harassment, which I can tell you growing up in Chicago that I definitely was. I did a lot of shitty things when I was younger. When the police stopped me, I said, "Sir," didn't act like an asshole, and never had an issue. But hey, that's just one man's experience. That doesn't prove a trend, ever. I love this little shit that she tacked on right here at the bottom. Victim blaming at its finest. So this whole thing came about from an interview that Giuliani gave to CBS's Face the Nation. The interview was inconsequential, like this article. It's based on Giuliani's opinion, and as he's retired, no longer holds any public office, and is a chairman/advisor for a law firm, his words should hold little to no impact on anyone's lives. If this was Giuliani from the early 2000s, I'd say otherwise. But as it's 2016, it's not that much of an impact. But back in the day, he was heralded as the man that improved the quality of life in New York, running it like a boss and being an honorary knight from the Queen in 2002. He was at the top of his game, but that shit happened 14 years ago. And in the public's eye, it might have well been in BC. But he had some take responsibility for your child's actions comments. So he's clearly a moron that should be destroyed by this little white girl who writes for the Huffington Post. I guess the life in politics, being one of the person responsible for the rapid decline in violence in the 90s and a fucking knight, doesn't mean as much as it used to. 2 paragraphs in and we're already knee-high in shit. Giuliani says the slogan Black Lives Matter is inherently racist and anti-American, while neglecting statistics that show black people are disproportionately targeted by police. What, are you telling me that slogan doesn't make a specific race of people more superior, or that a racial group is inferior to another? How else could one read such a slogan? As for anti-American, yeah, I could see that. But as it is, according to them, only Black Lives Matter, which actually is American to an extent. The ability to protest is as American as it gets. It may not be the thing I agree with, but I respect their voice to claim it. Just don't get upset when the KKK protests for White Lives Matter, since I see them as the other side of this racist coin. The real SJW shit here is this little jab that she added, while neglecting statistics that show black people are disproportionately targeted by police, without any links to what the fuck she's talking about. I'm guessing sourcing wasn't her strong suit. It's really hard to tell what she means by this. If she thinks statistics are a bunch of people repeating the same thing over and over again with written signs and lacking any hard numbers or credible sources, then it must be true, right? Oh wait, no it doesn't. She then goes on to quote,
"There's too much violence in the black community."
Which isn't entirely true when talking about all the violence, but when you filter to only show murders, then a different trend emerges. When overlaid with a racial map of New York City, you can see he isn't wrong with his assertion. When specifically talking about Black Lives Matter, I assume they mean murder rates. So from here on out, we'll be specifically talking about homicides, since those are the most serious crimes that truly affect lives. This also touches on why I hate this slogan, because as you can plainly see, there are murders in white, Asian, and a fuckload in Hispanic areas. All lives matter, bro. This isn't just a black and white fucking problem. She then quotes him again as he says,
If you want to deal with this on the black side, you've got to teach your children to be respectful to the police, and you've got to teach your children that the real danger to them is not the police. The real danger to them, 99 out of 100 times, 9,900 out of 1,000 times, are other black kids who are going to kill them. That's the way they're going to die.
That number he mentioned, 9,900 out of 1,000, is obviously a mistake. He had a little brain fart, but his numbers aren't too far off. Looking at the statistics for murder based on race, you can see that for a white guy, the chance of being murdered by a fellow white guy are 82.3%, compared to a white guy being murdered by a black guy, which is 14.76%. For black people, the chances of being murdered by a white guy are 13.10%. compared to being killed by a fellow black guy, which accounts for 89.96%. These are the most current statistics that the FBI has from 2014, but looking back as far as I could, it changes a little, but the percentages stay the same. If you're unlucky enough to be murdered, there's a 90% chance that someone within your own race is the person that did it, and there's an even higher chance that the person who murdered you is someone you know. So, you may be asking yourself why there's only 5,703 murders on the sheet I'm showing. Well, my eagle-eyed viewer, that's because those are the murders that were solved in 2014. For the remaining 35.5% of the unsolved murders, according to the FBI, there's no way to know who killed you, but I'll assume that the trend continues, for race anyway. And looking back on the New York map, we can see that the majority of murders happen in the most poverty-stricken areas, which I know Black Lives Matter does not march in. They're too busy pestering libraries, causing a stink in pride parades, or just being overly obnoxious to anyone who doesn't see eye to eye. If you really want to make a difference, the former mayor is correct, that you need to start cleaning up your own neighborhoods before yelling at the worthless college kids just trying to get through their day. While the majority of any race shot to death in the US are killed by other civilians, not police, yeah, no shit. Giuliani's statement ignores that black men are disproportionately affected by police shootings. Nice to see that she doubled down on her previous statement. At least now she's added some semblance of a source. Let's check it out. The link takes you to another Huffingtonpost article. Instead of anything with real numbers, the article is How to Reduce the Chance of Getting Shot by Police, written by a white dude, with the first point being, don't be black. While going into little detail of how to actually reduce the chance of being shot, I guess Andy's advice is, as a white guy, is to stop being black. Point 2 is run away to another country. Good one, Andy. Really solving the issue at hand. Why don't you go fuck yourself? An ongoing Huffington Post tally found that 40% of the unarmed men shot and killed by the police last year were black, despite black men accounting for only 6% of the population. Now this is interesting. Finally something with a little bit of credence, something to pick apart and read into. And this sentence was nearly lifted word for word from Andy's article, which makes me think that people don't actually write this shit. It's probably some evil computer that try to turn everyone against each other. But let's check out the Washington Post link. Holy shit, this is fucking impressive. Blows that shit show Huffington Post out of the water. So she said 40% of the unarmed men killed last year were black. Which sucks, but a lot of these tell a fairly similar story. It's hard to determine a threat, and given the chance, a police officer pulls a gun and fire in a second. Because they, just like you, don't want to die. It sucks that these men and 2 women were murdered, specifically someone like Betty Jones, who was killed accidentally in her front door, and my heart really goes out. But looking at the big picture here, 38 black people and 32 white people in a population of 322 million, that's less than 0.000002% of the US population. It really sucks for the families affected by these tragedies, but is it enough to rally behind? Does every life really matter to you? I know if I was one of the people in the family, I'd be angry as hell. May even hold up a sign, but ultimately I'd know that it wouldn't solve anything. But Giuliani didn't stop there. She goes on to quote,
If I were a black father and I was concerned about the safety of my child, really concerned about it, and not in a politically activist sense, I would say be very respectful to police. Most of them are good. Some can be very bad. And just be very careful.
Why are you quoting this? Do you not think that this is reasonable advice? Some cops are bad, yeah. It's a statistical truth. Just like some people are assholes. Give the wrong person power and they'll probably kill somebody. Cops aren't fucking robots. They're as human as you or I. Well, maybe not you, since I'm pretty sure you're a robot, but I know I'm not a robot. Giuliani continues,
I'd also say, be very careful of those kids in the neighborhood and don't get involved with them. Because, son, there's a 99% chance they're gonna kill you, not the police.
I see now. You're doubling down again on the fact that he's telling parents to take charge of raising their kids. As I've shown, he might be wrong with the percentages, but he's not too far off. If you watch the video, he comes off as a major asshole. Sounds like a crazy person half the time. So it's really easy to ignore Giuliani or make an article tearing him apart. It's low-hanging fruit. But Giuliani, as unfocused as he may sound, isn't lying. You see, I may not agree with everything that he says in the interview, but I do agree with the message he's trying to convey. His point, if he meant it or not, is that we put this morbid spectacle when 1 or 2 people get murdered by the police, but ignore the thousands murdered every year by their own neighbors. It's easy to focus on the small issues that ultimately solve nothing, because fixing the big problem here would require some actual fucking thought and hard work. A stupid slogan like Black Lives Matter is a perfect example. It boils down a real issue to a bite-sized nugget that can easily fit into a soundbite. And they know this. That's why they actively seek out and find places where they can get the highest chance of gaining the most publicity. Which is great from a business standpoint, but comes off as a little shitty and disingenuous when their fellow black communities need to hear this message the most. And hell, I wouldn't want some motherfucker talking for me anyway. That being said, there are a few things that Giuliani talked about that I actually like from the interview.
When there are 60 shootings in Chicago over the 4th of July, and 14 murders, and Black Lives Matter is non-existent. And then there's one police murder of very questionable circumstances, and we hear from Black Lives Matter. We wonder, do Black Lives matter, or only the very few black lives that are killed by white policemen?
If you're unaware of what he's talking about, over 60 people were shot in Chicago over the 4th of July weekend, 64 to be exact, with 4 of the people dying, leaving 60 wounded, including 2 little girls. The really fucked up thing about this is that this is down from previous years. Last year the count was 65, 10 dead, 55 wounded. And the year before that, 82, 16 dead, 66 wounded. These shootings happen mostly on the south and west side. And if you know anything about Chicago, those areas tend to be predominantly black and Hispanic. And what did Black Lives Matter do after the 4th of July weekend? Not a fucking thing. As someone from Chicago and has lost friends due to gang violence, I can see why he said something like this, since Chicago has the highest murder rate in the country, and I never see any Black Lives Matter protesters here. The message is clear. White people need to help us help ourselves, which is a message of dependency from a generation of entitled dipshits. I find the most offensive statement throughout this entire video is when the anchor says this.
Mr. Mayor, let me just ask you, you started off by saying that white Americans have to understand that this is happening in the black community, and then at the end you said members of the black community have to teach their children to behave in front of the police. That those messages seem to conflict with one another.
How do those two statements conflict exactly? How does white people sympathizing with black issues and black parents bringing up their children to know the realities of life is that we live in a world where the potential of being killed by a police officer is still a risk, somehow exclusive? Does he want white people to teach kids the police might shoot them? Taking a closer look at the Washington Post article, it appears to me that the white people are twice as likely to be killed by police as blacks. Yeah, I'm not accounting for population, but this asshole's not accounting for logic. But in all seriousness, I wish police didn't kill people either. But the reality of our world is that it happens. And until the day that it isn't the case, I agree that black parents should warn their kids about this shit. Guns, gangs, cops. Hell, I would. The vibe I'm getting from CBS is that he thinks white people should ride in and save all black people from their decisions, which comes off as super racist. Morons wouldn't think it's racist, but it's fucking racist. And that's my problem with a lot of these kinds of interviews, where whites, specifically in politics, in their desperation to talk to minorities, they're just talking down to minorities. Like, show people a little bit of fucking respect. No one likes being talked down to like they're a child. It's really easy to spot the obvious racists, but it's something entirely different when they're hiding behind a suit, a tie, and a lie. Yeah, the world isn't perfect. Every day you have the potential of dying. We're all going to die one day. It might be from cancer, car accident, suicide, or shot by police. I agree, the police shouldn't be shooting or killing anyone. In the UK, only one guy was killed by the police last year. In Japan, there was no deaths by the police for the last 2 years. If you really have a fear of police officers murdering you, take Andy's advice and run away. hide from your fears. But as someone who's built his life by his own hands and never asked for a handout, I wouldn't listen to that pussy. If something really irked me, I'd actively try to fix it, other than annoy and pester the wrong people. As ignorant as Giuliani sounds, he's for the most part correct. The real issue we have with society from a murdering standpoint are from those around us, a husband, a boyfriend, or just someone that we've known for a little while. The article finally ends with her continued ignorance of what Giuliani actually said, and just continuing her grandstand, saying that the recent murders in Dallas aren't directly caused by Black Lives Matter. I have several issues with this line of thinking, along with the way that the events in Dallas unfolded. First off, sure, Black Lives Matter had nothing to do with the crazed assholes' plan to murder police, specifically white police. I guess it was just some crazy coincidence that the rampage happened the same time and place as the Black Lives Matter protest was being held. Yeah, there's no possibility that they may have had some collusion. Secondly, the police aren't walking away squeaky clean from this shit show either. How they ended the standoff was fucking horrifying. Using tactics that a terrorist would use is just as bad as being a fucking terrorist. When I first heard that the police essentially used a drone rigged with a bomb to kill an American citizen, I couldn't believe it. There's no excuse for such force. This needs to stop here. This is reality, not a fucking Bronson film. I know I've been on the police's side for the most of this, but that's when we're talking about a quick decision made within a split second between an officer and a potential threat. This is a tactical plan to use a bomb on someone. That's excessive to the extent of the fucking word. And finally, the worst of all, the media circus that builds up non-racial issues, making them into something more than they actually are. Like the two guys that got killed last week by the police. There's no evidence that those men were murdered because they were black. Maybe shitty cops, but unless they can prove that they're racist, they aren't. But that doesn't stop shitty news outlets like Huffingtonpost, CNN, BuzzFeed, who continue to perpetuate this idea that whites are running around killing black people. Some psychotic motherfucker is bound to take it seriously and start shooting up places. It's just how paranoia works. The real issue here isn't black, white, Asian, Native American, or Hispanic. It's the news agencies that keep bombarding us with this bullshit without thinking about the consequences of their actions. They don't fucking care. If someone else got killed because of their influence, it's just another day's worth of ratings. Ka-ching! Once again, I'm Howard Williams, and you're fucking welcome.